where we left off. We plugged in our values into our discriminant. So we have the -5 squared minus 4 times 1 times 6. -5 squared we know is 25 minus 4 times 1 is 1. 4 times 6 is 24. 25 minus 24 equals 1. So we end up with a positive number. So that means we have 2 real rational roots for this. So this is using the discriminant to take and determine how many roots and what kind of roots you have for your quadratic. So this kind of helps you before you solve, knowing what kind of answers you're going to get in the end. That way you know, am I going to have real? Am I going to have imaginary? What am I going to get? All right, one more. Number 34, we have x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 0. So we're going to have 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 9. 6 squared is 36 minus 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 9 is 36. We end up with 0. So that means we have one real rational root. So one real rational. So anytime you get just a 0 for an answer for your discriminant, that means you have one real rational root. If you get a positive number, that means you have 2 real rational roots. And if you get a negative number, that means you have a complex imaginary root, okay? All right. So the last section that we are looking at today is solve the quadratic equations below using an appropriate method. So obviously we know we have several different ways that we can take and solve these. We have the quadratic formula, we have factoring, we have factor by grouping, we have completing the square. So we can use any of these when we're solving. So we're going to do number 36 together. So I'm going to use the quadratic formula for this one. So remember that's x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So our b value is -3, so we have x equals -3 plus or minus the square root of -3 squared minus 4 times 5 times 7 all over 2 times 5. All right, so -3 becomes a +3, so we have x equals 3 plus or minus the square root. -3 squared is 9 minus 4 times 5 is 20. 20 times 7 is 140 all over 10. So we have 9 minus 140 underneath our root. Obviously, that's going to become a negative number for us. So x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of -131 all over 10. Now, we cannot leave it like this with the negative underneath the square root because now we know how to get rid of that negative. So we're going to bring an I to the outsides. This equals 3 plus or minus I root 131 all over 10. This is your answer. You don't need to take and try to find out what that value is. We're going to leave it just like that. Because of the I, you can't actually find the value of this. So at least not at this point in your mathematical careers. So this is our answer for this, okay? So anytime you have I, just leave it as the I. Don't try to find a decimal version because in your calculator, if you try and plug in an I, it is not going to work, let me tell you. It's going to say error. Or if you try to plug in the square root of -131, it's going to tell you error. So, okay? So this is what you guys are doing on those last 4. You're just taking and solving the quadratic equation, so finding its x-intercepts using some methods. So you can use any method you prefer. You could do the quadratic formula for all of them. You could use factoring, factor by grouping. Obviously, factor by grouping would probably be on 38 since it's got the number out front of the x squared. We've got that 6 there, so that would mean we need to factor by group or use the quadratic formula. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. Your keyword for this lesson is imaginary. Imaginary. Have a great day, guys.